going to sing a song now that has to do with, it's called the Residential School Song. And you've heard part of the story of the journey to freedom from Kenny and from Linda. And I just wanted to recognize that we have a lot of residential school survivors here in the room with us. And that was who the apology was specifically for, the survivors and their families. Our whole family went to the Jack Indian Boarding School, which is located just west of Fort Fraser before you get to Fraser Lake. And I remember the day that they gave the building back to the Carrier Nation, back to Notley. We went to a big ceremony. My mom brought us out there, and I remember the formidable brick building and how huge it was. And my mom took us through and showed us around. And it wasn't very long after that building was given back to our people that it was just reduced to rubble. It was demolished completely. And some people think, you know, we could have used that for health stuff or whatever, we could use it, but it just held, I think, too many memories for our people. It had to go. And I want to talk a little bit, just briefly, about our perception of First Nations people. The church is always talking about pray for Native leaders to be raised up, that God would raise up Native leaders. Well, that's a really good prayer, but we've been praying that for way too many years. Now it's time to recognize those Native leaders that God has been raising up for lots of years. Just Native people have a different set of values that we work on. You have to recognize the Native leadership and ask them to come forward, ask them to come and pray, or ask them to lead. Because it's a value of ours to not sort of push ourselves forward, but to wait to be recognized. And I think I heard that somewhere else before. Maybe it was the Bible. It's a precious value of our Native people. The residential schools will never be able to measure the effect that these schools have had on our people. And when you see our Native people, you tend to see the ones that are most obvious in society, the ones who are downtown on 3rd and George, who are passed out or who are well on their way to passing out, the ones who have just succumbed to a life of absolute alcoholism or drug abuse. That's what you tend to see. But you know what? That's not what we see. I have in my family beautiful elders who have been sober like for over 20 years, working really hard in the community. I know our band administrator is working hard and praying for the people, going to church every Sunday, wanting to see God bring change. I see a chief and council who are striving to make things better for our people. That's what I get to see. Now, you don't always get to see that. But our perceptions need to be changed a little bit. And you know what? Even mine needed to be changed. When I was a little girl, I was sitting on my grandpa, Alec George's porch. And we were always there. My mom always brought us out there. It's like my second home. Now it's my Auntie Irene's house. I was sitting on that porch, and a man came up onto the lawn, and his name was Paul Alec. And he was drunk. He was always drunk. And he was dancing to a song that he was singing, and we didn't understand him. We didn't know what he was talking about. He was dancing, and he had greasy hair and a greasy face and dirty clothes from a couple of weeks on the drunk. And my cousins and I looked at him, and we were ashamed of him. And so we laughed. And he looked up at us, and he thought we were amused by his song, so he laughed too. Well, some 50 years earlier, 5 little boys ran away from the Jack Indian Boarding School. We don't know the reasons. They didn't give us reasons why they ran away. But today, based on some of the stories that we know from the residential school survivors, we can imagine what they were running away from. They ran away on January the 1st. It was 30 below zero. They left before supper time, and they weren't reported missing until, well, they were walking across the railroad tracks, which would have brought them in fairly close proximity to Nod Lake, our village. But instead, they decided to take a shortcut across the frozen lake. When they did that, one of those little boys, he turned back. The next morning, those boys were discovered missing. They sent out a search party from Natlihuatan and Stalatan, and some of the boys' own fathers found the 4 frozen bodies of those little boys between the ages of 7 and 10 years old on that lake. And that one little boy who turned back, the one boy who survived that fateful night, was none other than the man who was dancing drunk on our lawn, Paul Alec. And when I look back on that day, and I remember his greasy face and his greasy hair and his alcohol breath, once again I'm ashamed, but this time not of him, but of myself, that I didn't know the story. And I learned too late the story of his life to do anything to reach out. And so many of our Native people are like that. The ones who are really hurting, they're very obvious to us. We don't know their stories. This song, the residential school song, is about the first mother and son who were ever separated by these schools. And as we travel, we tell these stories, as hard as they are to talk about. It's part of our healing. My son, when you went away, you were so young and strong. I just couldn't wait for the day to have you back home where you belong. The only thing that kept
Thank you.